Permaculture Design Course based on Permaculture Designer's Manual. Author Bill Mollison, the father of permaculture. Okay, this book you can purchase from Tagari Publications. It's an expensive book. The last lesson we talked about the prime directive of permaculture and the 3 ethics. We highlighted the 3rd ethic for clarification because many people have changed the 3rd ethic, and I gave reasons as to why we shouldn't. Okay, this lesson is based on starting at the place where we ended the last time concerning the ethics, and this last sentence that we read, we see how enlightened self-interest leads us to evolve ethics. Now, of course, there's cooperation and there's communities, but if we can't do this on our own, if we can't convert ourselves to more sensible behavior, we aren't going to create a sustainable environment. Sustainable meaning life systems that can create themselves, maintain themselves, and reproduce themselves with very little inputs, based on just simple sunshine and rainfall. To go forward, these then are the ethics expressed in permaculture. Having evolved ethics, we can then devise ways to apply them to our lives, economies, gardens, land, and nature. This is what this book is about. The mechanisms of mature ethical behavior, or how to act to sustain the earth. That is a good one. This is what this book is about. The mechanisms of mature ethical behavior, or how to act to sustain the earth. There is more than one way to achieve permanence and stability in land or society. However, some of them are lacking sustainability. Here's one. It's the peasant approach. Here people haul nutrients from canals, cesspits, pathways, and forests to an annual grain culture. We could describe this as feudal permanence for its methods, period, and politics. People were bound to the landscape by unremitting toil and in service to the state or landlord. This leads eventually to famine and revolution. In biological terms, they call that overshooting the carrying capacity. You have 2 main forces that are working against one another. One is a growing population, and the second being declining resources. And that ultimately is what leads to famine and revolution. The second approach, and this one is actually opposed to regenerative. I spelled it wrong up here. Regenerative, come on, wake up. Agriculture. Okay. This is specifically pointing a spear at the heart of the regenerative agriculture movement right here. Second approach is on permanent pasture. Modern Western farms, and this is what the regenerative agriculture wished to do, is convert these modern Western farms into their method of growing food, where large holdings, and the reason why they do that is because that's who has the money. Obviously you want to get paid, right? So you're going to do your consulting to people who have money, which makes sense. I mean, I agree with that. Why would you want to not work for money in this economic system? Okay, large holdings and few people create vast grazing leases. This is what supports modern civilization. Few people, vast grazing leases, or it could be overlaid to modern agriculture with grain crop growing as well. Few people, vast crop leases. Usually for a single species of animal, or in the case of agriculture, plant. This is best described as baronial permanence. Okay. Near-regal properties of immense extent. You should see the dairy farms around this county here. Just monsters. Huge amount of cows. Working at the lowest possible level of land use. Pasture or cropland is the least productive use of the land we can devise. Let's do that again. That is exactly right. I'll use a red one. We want to highlight this one. Pasture or cropland is the least productive use of land we can devise. Such systems, once mechanized, destroy whole landscapes and soil complexes. They can then best be typified as agricultural deserts. There's no life there other than what they are promoting. And even then, as the soil degrades, it becomes much harder to continue their practices. Okay, and just what is a potential forests? Forests are the answer, are the replacement for pasture and cropland. However, industrial man will see these as a permanent agriculture. You look at all these tree plantations of single species of trees in neat little rows. That isn't any different than pasture or cropland. So what we do is we convert these forests into a polyculture, into a different range of species. But these need generations of care and knowledge, and thus needs a tribal or communal reverence only found in stable communities. This is a long-term, over generations, knowledge. This is the communal permanence that we should be seeking right here. Basically based on perennial crops. Communal permanence. Okay, to be able to plant a pecan or citrus when we are old. In the northern climate it would be chestnuts and persimmons. And to know it will not be cut down by our children's children. Communal permanence over the generations. These plantings and care is over generations. Grandparents to parents to grandchildren and beyond. Some trees can live for 1,000 years, thousands of years. Some of these nut pines, so it would be many, many generations. And the further we depart from the communal permanence, the greater risk of tyranny, feudalism, and revolution. And the more work for less yield. That's where we are right now. Any error or disturbance, right now the idea is virus. Any virus can then bring disaster, as can a drought year in a desert grain crop, or a distant political decision on tariffs. Here's another one right there, tariffs. That's where we are right now. These tariffs that are happening between nations right now are dramatically affecting our economies, dramatically. And I think there's going to be food shortages within a year. At least of nutritional food. And then there's already a shortage in nutritional food. The real risk is that the needs of those people working on the ground and inhabitants are overthrown by the needs or greeds of commerce and centralized power. Just think about as simple as a small garden, and your local government comes in and says, hey, we want half of that. If they can't get the money, they're going to be asking for that. They want to support their power source, their power base. Okay, and here in this case, it's the forest is cut for warships or newspaper, and then we are reduced to serfs in a barren landscape. This has already been proven true. This has been the fate of peasant Europe, Ireland, and much of the Third World. We are reduced to serfs in a barren landscape. Okay, modern crop agriculture is totally dependent on external energies. Hence the oil problem and its associated pollution. Okay, oil is the hugest input going into modern agriculture. Without this oil, it wouldn't be able to operate. And I will also add that as more oil is applied to the land in terms of mechanization and chemical fertilizers and various pesticides, but various biocides, the pollution increases and the soil base declines. And at some point, the carbon's going to be out of the soil, and it's no longer going to be able to grow food, even with doubling or tripling or 4 times in the amount of inputs, oil inputs that are happening today. Of course, that's not going to happen because the costs associated with all these inputs will be far exceed any of the returns on investments, any of the returns generated by the crops grown. Okay, let's go to figure 1.1. Read the first paragraph here and then we'll do it. It is a very simple but sufficient illustration of the case I'm making. Selected forests not only yield more annual crops, but provide a diverse, nutrient, and fuel resource for such crops. Diverse nutrient and fuel resources. That's with selected forests. We're going to design these forests to provide a diverse nutrient and fuel resource. Let's go to the illustration. We'll start on this side right here. Let's bring this back out here. Remember, I don't have good equipment and this isn't a studio. Of course, I'm not charging you any money for this either. Okay. Maybe I should offer a certificate at the end of all this and then make you pay me something then, huh? Don't anybody would send any money to me anyways. Okay, this is our contemporary Western agriculture. We have the big machine. We have the huge blocks of single species plantings. And this is what we want to convert into a more diverse system. Okay, this is year 1. By year 4, we're beginning to see the efforts of our trees growing that we've planted. We've kind of spread them around. We still are growing some crops because we need to eat something while all this is growing. Okay, but you don't see any mechanization here. These are all small plots that can be easily harvested by hand. Okay, now let's go to the highlighted one here. This is after year 8. And of course, this all depends on the climate, the type of soil, and your effort. But if you have the right conditions by year 8, 70% of the cropland that we started with is now devoted to forage farming. Oh, I like that word, forage farming. Yeah, forage farming. We're going to have to use that. All right. Now we see very little of these crops, and the crops that are growing, the annual crops that are growing in amongst the trees, and it's the trees that are providing your base of nutrients through their fruits and their nuts and their berries. And of course the trees are going to attract critters, and now you can derive a source of protein from the critters that you're going to be growing in the same area. Here he has evolution from contemporary agriculture to a permaculture, permanent culture. A lot of people, and Bill Mollison himself in the beginning when he did this book, he called it permaculture was deriving from permanent agriculture. But in later years, as he was being filmed for various interviews, he changed this to permanent culture. Because as we begin to develop these systems, there really isn't much agriculture left to them. So it's permanent culture, and it's permanent human culture. Meaning we are going to be living with the biological resources as they are made available. Instead of overshooting the carrying capacity of the land, we are going to adapt and fluctuate along with these biological resources. If we take a fruit or a berry or a nut from a tree, we are only taking from the surplus and will not damage the system. And that's the idea. We're going to keep our population in tune with available biological resources without damaging the biological system that produces the resources. Here he has attempted to cost contemporary agriculture against a changeover to permaculture over a period of 3 to 8 years, transition period. Basic changes involve replacing animal forage grains with a tree crop, increasing forest cover, adopting low to no tillage on remaining croplands, retrofitting the house for energy conservation, and providing some, if not all, fuel on the farm.